Hey everyone, welcome back to Pete Punch Beef Gaming. Today we're going to take a look at the wrap up of the Path to Glory Age of Sigmar event for 2022. It has been a fun ride and it's time to debrief the whole thing. All right, let's get into it. So I want to cover a few things in this video. One, I want to cover the reflections on the league, so to speak. Two, I want to talk a little bit about the painting and hobby, and not just from the perspective of my own army, but I want to share some photos of the other armies that I saw get displayed this last Wednesday night. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about kind of my Stormcast lessons learned, if you will, where I came out on all of this. So without any further ado, let's jump right into league reflections. So just some fundamentals. Let's talk about this real quick. We played, you had 1,000-point roster to start with. The first week was 750 points. The second week was 1,000 points. The third week was 1,500, and then we elected to do another week at 1,500. And then we had 2 weeks at 2,000. So we had a total of 6 weeks for the league overall, with the final week being, or week 7, if you will, kind of the paint to glory, a chance to show off everything that we had gotten accomplished. Overall, I really appreciated the change in adding the extra weeks for the higher point counts. I felt like, at least for me, I needed a little bit more time to kind of get used to my new army and see how it played at a higher level. So that was good. I think for the next league, we're also going to do 2 weeks at each point level, but there's going to be some variation. I don't think we're going to do 750. I think we're going to start at 1,000, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. The next was the map campaign. The event organizer in this case, he drew this beautiful map, and we all put out or created these 1-inch by 1-inch banners, and we were able to kind of place them up there. We really didn't feel like there is as much interaction with the map as we really wanted to, so I think we're going to highlight that going forward. Now, it's important to note that in the Age of Sigmar rules as a whole, when you look at the Path to Glory, they don't really have any specific rules for any sort of visual representation of a map. Of course, you can take over territories, and whether it's adding wizards or bolstering units or reinforcing units rather, or upping your monster count limit, whatever the case may be, you can do that. But there's no like visual depiction of you taking over specific territories, and we want to do that. We want to do exactly that and try and map that out. Another observation I had was we had about 10 players overall. We had a Nurgle King army, Maggotkin of Nurgle army, a Tzeentch army. We had Night Haunts. We had 2 Stormcast Eternal armies, which were totally different. We had, I think, a Slaves to Darkness army. We had an Auric army, and then finally, I think, an OBR army. And I think that more or less captured what we had. I'm sure I'm probably missing something out there, but it was about 10-ish or so players that we had floating around, which was a really nice group of players. We generally played on Wednesday nights over the course of the league, but you weren't restricted to just Wednesday afternoons, evenings. You could have played games outside of that. One of the cool things that I was able to accomplish with doing this Path to Glory was getting to play some new players and meet some new people and call some folks friends who I just didn't know previously. And so I'm really grateful for that opportunity to branch out. Now, I will say that I did not get a chance to play everybody that was in the league, and I would really like to give that a go the next time, is kind of diversify a little bit there. So I personally am going to work on that a bit more. And so lastly, let's talk a little bit about the next steps. So our event organizer is going to change things up a little bit, and he's tweaking the rules as we speak. So none of this is set in stone, but we're going to kick off again here in a couple of weeks. But essentially, it'll be another 6-week campaign. We're going to do 1,000 points for 2 weeks, 1,500 for 2 weeks, and then 2,000 for 2 weeks. It will be territory based, so we will use a map and place your flags as you take things over. You can raid opponents' territories. They won't lose the territory, but the territory will downgrade. And a lot of the territories are heavily borrowed from out of the Age of Sigmar book and the Path to Glory, but there's some modifications. There's some cool custom work that he's doing. So for example, every army will have access to a piece of faction terrain, not just the ones that have it naturally. So So examples of that might be the Ogre Maw tribes, Ossiarch Bone Reapers, things of that nature. They already have their own terrain features, and they're going to try and people can build their own, and then we'll use the narrative terrain rules that are in the Age of Sigmar book to give them an ability. So it's nothing game breaking, and certainly is part of already the kind of the established rules for games anyways, but we're going to try and tweak that a little bit. So 6 weeks, 3-point levels. You can go higher. Heroes won't come into play until you upgrade your stronghold to the highest point levels, and then you can bring in named characters. Again, we stuck to named characters not coming in until later in the campaign at 1500 point level, because we just didn't want a Gotrek dominating at 750 points or something along those lines. We didn't want a negative play experience, and so we're still trying to kind of moderate when those named characters come in, and we're excited to take a look at them. So I think that's there is one other big thing that we'll talk about. We're going to get rid of the casualty rules. The casualty rules are going to go out the window. Most players didn't find that they added a lot of grit to the campaign in terms of value. It was more just I don't know, sort of Damocles hanging over your head. So that we're going to pitch out the window and move on with it, as well as the upgrades, the enhancements that you can get to your troops. It sounded like maybe a few of the players remembered and used those enhancements. So, maybe your +1 to wound or reroll charge rolls, whatever the case may be. But most folks didn't use it. So we're not really going to worry about experience for this next one. It's just putting units out on the board. And so I think those are primarily the biggest changes here. I am looking forward to the next league. I will be playing a different army, which I will do a separate video on. I love the Stormcast. Totally going to keep my Stormcast army. I have some work to do to finish up the last 2,000 points, which I'll get to here shortly. But I'm going to switch it up and play something a little bit different this next go around. So with that, let's go ahead and switch over to the painting and hobbying and talk a little bit about that. So the goals for the painting and hobbying portion of this league was, one, to just do the hobby. Get out there, paint some models, put some stuff together, and try and, get those kits you spent all that good money on prepared to hit the table and see some paint if possible. I think a lot of the players really put a ton of effort into getting just that done. And I have photos that I'm going to start sharing here so you can see as I'm talking all of the armies that we had going on there. There were no hard requirements built into the Path of Glory around painting. Just so everybody knows, you didn't have to have any of your units painted. Assembled is fine. That was what you got. And in some cases, that's all I was able to do was assemble a unit to play with it. But in many cases, painting was a good part of that. Next, I think one of the trends that we really saw was chaos was in abundance in this Path to Glory. We had Disciples of Tzeentch, we had the Magakin of Nurgle, we had the Slaves to Darkness, we had a Slaanesh army for sure. We had a Slaanesh army. I think the only thing we didn't see was a Khorne army, and maybe that's because the new codex isn't out. I don't know what it was, but we didn't see one of those, although I'm both looking forward and terrified of the thought of seeing a Khorne army hit the table with a new army book here before too long. Anyway, it was great. It was fun to see all the diversity of armies. I think the only thing that we saw doubling up on was the Stormcast. We had 2 Stormcast players, one being myself. But what was unique was we both went in very different directions in terms of what our Stormcast armies were comprised of. I think he had Fulminators and priests and things of that nature, and I was more geared towards starting with the Dominion boxes I've talked about in previous videos. Okay, moving on from there, let's jump into kind of the top 5 things that I learned about the Stormcast playing this. The number 5 that I'm going to build to here is the Dominion box and the value and what my impression is. But before we get there, let's talk about the first 4. Stormcast have a ton of options. That's one of the things I learned. There are so many heroes, both named and unnamed, and ways to go to build a Stormcast Eternals army that it is incredible. I almost, and I'm an experienced gamer, I almost found it a little bit overwhelming to pick an area and dive into it. So if you were brand new to it, you can really both embrace the analysis of figuring out what you want to play or get lost in it, depending on how your mind works. I think the range of models is beautiful, but there is just all sorts of stuff that you can build. I'm kind of glad that I anchored around the Dominion box because it gave me a place to start. Otherwise, I'm not sure how I would have determined what I put on the table, other than maybe just by the look of the models overall. The next thing I learned is the Knight Arcanum that I brought. He played in every single one of my games. And the Knight Arcanum, I don't know, he on occasion was able to get a spell off, and on occasion he was able to shut down an opponent's spell. I never was even able to cast my Eternal spells. My Life Swarm, that just never got there. I don't know why, it just never happened. And it could be the reason why I felt like the Knight Arcanum just wasn't there was because, not wasn't there, but wasn't super effective, was all the armies I faced had tons of spellcasters, and so I was just completely outmatched. It was almost like I just had a token mage on the table. It's okay, I love the model. It was super fun to paint up, and maybe in a different build we would see more productivity, or with the evocators or something like that to help support him a little bit. That would be a thing, but he didn't crank out a whole lot of mileage for me. Next, I want to talk about the Annihilator. So there's two types of Annihilators. There's the Annihilators with the shields and hammers, and then there's the Annihilators with the grand hammers. The big functional difference between the two is the 2+ save with the shields versus the 3+ save for the grand hammers. And the grand hammers do an additional wound, so each hit does 3 wounds, and it has a -2 rend, where the standard hammers are 2 wounds and -1 rend. So you think, maybe that's not that big a deal. It's just 1 damage different, 1 rend different. But I'll tell you, I feel like I got a lot more mileage out of the grand hammers versus the 2+ armor save. I didn't notice a big difference between having a 2+ versus a 3+. I could certainly do all-out defense, but maybe it was the playstyle, because I would drop in those Annihilators, and my goal was not to have the unit survive. My goal was to have it punch something in the mouth so hard that the points trade was good. So I fully expected to lose the unit, and the Grand Hammers are a 240-point unit, and the shield version of them is a 200-point unit. So I looked for a big, meaty cornerstone piece in my opponent's army, and I would try and take it out. So whether it was a named character or one of their clutch units that they built everything around, or their general, that's what I tried to aim, and I just treated it like a cruise missile. So I think knowing what I was playing with them for, I would probably not field the shields, and I would go straight with the Grand Hammers. Now, if I was playing a Stormkeep army where I'm sitting on objectives and I'm playing a very defensive game, maybe I'd switch that up, because a 1+ save can make all the difference in the world. But for the way I built this army, I think I'd go Grand Hammers all the way, even though they're 40 points more expensive. So anyway, there you go. Now this next one is perhaps controversial, but I included a unit of Stormguard Drakes, and those are a little over 300 points for a unit of 2 in the Stormguard Drakes. They do some cool stuff. They can charge in the hero phase on a 2+. They can, their breath weapon on a 1/2 does nothing, 3/4 does D3 mortal wounds, 5/6. It does D6 mortal wounds on the charge, because I kitted them with spears. I think they do, it's either 2 or 3 wounds apiece. They have a 3+ save. The Drakes themselves do 2 wounds overall. And then at the end of the combat phase, they can roll a D6. And if the number is equal to or higher than the average wounds of a particular model in a unit, they can just remove a model from the game. So if it's, I don't know, say they're attacking a Nurglekin troop that has 2 wounds. If you roll a 2 or higher, I can just pull that model off the board, which is pretty good. But at 300 and some odd points, I found my opponents were certainly worried about them. They certainly gave them a wide berth, but I didn't feel like they had quite the alpha strike as, say, the Annihilators did. They're good, don't get me wrong. And certainly people gave them a lot of respect. But I almost wonder if I'd been better off sinking that 340 or 300 and whatever points into some more Annihilators or something different. Now, the one thing that they do very well is they're exceptionally fast, and they're monsters, so you get the monster features in combat as well. So that's good too. So I'm not saying they aren't a good model. I'm not saying I regret the purchase. I'm not saying I'm not going to paint them up and play them. But I think I had a different expectation when I bought them, and I think they've got their place, but I don't think that they're the end-all, be-all, or broken by any stretch of the imagination. Now, where I do think they have a really good advantage is they have 9 wounds apiece, so the unit has 18 wounds total, where compared to Annihilators, they're sitting on 9 wounds as a whole. So for about 100 points more, you're getting about double the wounds, but they don't have a table or a chart, so as they take wounds, they become less effective. So I think that's a really powerful aspect of them. Anyway, definitely good, definitely worth both the dollars and the points to bring them, but maybe not as devastating as I thought they would be. Just my 2 cents on that whole deal. I know it's probably controversial, and the tournament players out there maybe are screaming at me saying that's absolutely wrong, but that's my experience, so I thought I'd share it. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about here is the Dominion box value. So the Dominion box, just to remind everybody, had a nice limited edition cover core hardcover core rule book. It had a whole bunch of Oryx in there, which were great, and then it had 2 5-man units of Vindictors, or 1 10-man unit. It had 3 Annihilators with shields. It had Yndrasta. It had the Knight Imperator. It had the Knight Arcanum, Lord Imperator and Knight Arcanum. And I have to say, and I paid full price for my Dominion box set, I still feel like that is a smoking deal. It gets you the basics of what you need for a Stormcast army. You get Yndrasta, which is a great character. Oh, and you also get a Knight Vexler with Apotheosis banner, which I never even got on the table. So it is a good deal, and I'm telling you right now, there's a lot of game stores that are sitting out there with these boxes that haven't moved them yet because of, they purchased too many or whatever the case may be. So you can get these boxes at steep discount out there. If you're looking to build either the Auric or the Stormcast, although I will really highlight the Stormcast because I haven't played with the Aurics yet. The Stormcast army is fantastic. It's certainly worth the purchase. I think 1 box of Annihilators is $50 alone. So when you consider the value, you probably have $200 in value with the Annihilator, or with all of the stuff in there. Do it. It is so worth it. Anyway, that is the grand summary of the 2022 first Path to Glory. I really want to thank Collector Mania, the shop I play at. I want to thank Steve, who runs everything there. I want to thank all of my opponents for great games. I didn't have a bad game in the bunch. They were all just perfect folks to play against, so thank you for that. And I'm definitely coming back for the next one, and I look forward to building a new army and exploring what that's going to look like. So thank you, everybody who's tuned in and watched the end of the video. If you like what I'm doing, please like and subscribe. I appreciate growing this channel, and I appreciate getting the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. So until then, happy gaming. Take care.